Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday. I hope everyone has been doing great, having a good start to the week. Again, like Alvin said, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to be having just a great discussion, right? We're just here to share space with one another. Remember that this month is just a beautiful recognition on Latinos and Latinas all around on our campus, in our community. And we're just going to be speaking on how the specific ways we identify with each other, whether it be Latinx, whether it be Hispanic, Latino, Latina, whatever it may be. So we're just trying to provide more of a space, right, where we can just share how we express ourselves, how we express within our community, and how we are part of our community at large. And before we go into the beginning of it, right, I just want to say this has been an incredible collaboration all throughout campus between Assc, student equity and support programming. As you can tell from our panels, we have a student government leader, Angel Gomez. We'll do introductions soon. And then we have Professor Castro. We have Jose Milan, who is a staff member as well on campus. But just to bring us all, before we go into our beginning of our discussion, I would like to just burn some sage for us. Sage has been known to be a very sacred ritual. It has been passed on from our indigenous ancestors, and I'm burning it also to remember that Skyline College is on Mowekma land. It's on sacred land. It's on a lonely land, the Bay Area. And we are doing this to say thank you for letting us just be on this land, be on this ground that we work on, that we study on. And I just want to make sure that I am burning the sage for myself too, so that I can come as my authentic whole self. I'm making sure that I am taking away any stress, any negativity, because I want to enter this space as pure and as positive as possible. And I'm sharing this sage button smell. I'm hoping you all can smell it, especially to my panels who are going to be sharing a significant amount of their own journeys, their own identities, right, on how they identify with Latinx, Latino, Latina, Hispanic, what have you. I'm doing this also so that we can all just be inhaling it, be at peace, and just get ready for a great dialogue. And I'm also going to be burning some Palo Santo as well. And just to give you a quick introduction on who I am, again, thank you to Alvin and Ryan and all of ASCC for letting me be part of this incredible panel and dialogue. My name is Martin Marquez. I am a San Francisco native, and I have been working at Skyline for about 7 years now. I currently serve as the division assistant for the Student Equity and Support Programs Division. But this is a very important topic to me because it hits home to me. I personally identify as a Chicano, first generation, Latino, from my parents who are both Mexican immigrants. And I, in my own free time, I use photography, I use paintings, and I use poetry to highlight not only my narrative as a Latino, but also highlighting Raza, Latino, and Latina representation in the Bay Area. Growing up, I saw the transition in the Mission District just completely change in front of me, where it was so rich in culture for the Latinos and Latinas that helped me grow up and helped me build such a strong connection and strong sense of my heritage, right? To slowly seeing that disappear a little bit. But now that I'm older, I'm seeing so much resistance from people in my age group wanting to make sure that our culture is still alive in the Mission, in the Bay Area. So I have picked up those hobbies, but more so those gifts, right? That I feel that they were passed on from my ancestors to make sure that my lineage will still be strong and my Latino and Latina people will be still represented in our culture. So with that, I'm gonna be introducing our panels. Today, we have Professor Luciana Castro. She was born in Brazil and was raised in Argentina. She graduated with a Bachelor of Linguistics at the University of Sao Paulo. And she also received a Master's of Linguistics and a PhD in Hispanic languages and literatures at UCLA. She also taught Portuguese, French, Spanish at UCLA and the Meso community College in Arizona. Professor Castro is an interpreter and translator of Portuguese and Spanish for Citicorp Center. Currently, she is the World Languages Department Coordinator and a profesora of Spanish at Skyline College. Let's give her a warm welcome. Thank you, Professor, for being here with us. We're excited to hear your input. Up next, we have the ASSC Vice President, Angel Gomez. Now, Angel has lived a significant part of his life in Mexico, in which he enjoyed and learned that he is passionate about collaboration toward the community that surrounds him. Angel is an active member of Skyline College and the Vice President of the Associated Students of Skyline College. He is currently working toward computer science and physics major. Thank you, Angel, too. We're excited to hear what you have to say as well. Our next and final panelist is Jose Milan. Jose is the Guardian Scholars Retention Specialist. He was born and raised in Guadalajara, Jalisco, and he immigrated to the Bay Area in 2005. He attended and graduated from South San Francisco High School, Skyline College, and San Francisco State University. He received a high school diploma, associates in interdisciplinary studies, and a bachelor's in Latinas and Latino studies. Jose has worked in student services since 2016. Thank you, Jose, for being here with us too, and we're excited to hear what you have to say. So I'm just going to be going over the word Hispanic and Latinx, and these are going to be the focal words and themes and topics that we're going to be going that we will be reviewing and speaking on at today's panel and in today's discussion. So the word Hispanic, it is, by definition, it is a person of Latin American descent, especially those from Cuba or Puerto Rico. Historically, a region once called Hispaniola. Hispanic also means to be in relation to the people, culture, and language of Spain. The next word is Latinx, which is a newer term, right? That we've been hearing recently in the past couple years. So Latinx is, by definition, a person who was born or lives in Mexico, Central or South America. Also, it can be a person whose family originally came from Mexico, Central or South America. In Spanish, the O is placed after a word to indicate male. The A is also to indicate female. In the US, people have added X to represent those who are gender non-binary. So that is why it made the transition from Latino, Latina to Latinx. And that is what we're going to be speaking on, right? We're going to be speaking on the words Latino, Latina, Latinx, and Hispanic. And before, again, we enter the space into our dialogue, I would like to just say thank you to everyone for being here with us and for giving us the time to begin this dialogue. But before I do so, I would also like to ask my panelists if they would like to add anything else before we go into the discussion, anything about your identity or how you self-identify, or if everyone is okay for us to begin now. I see a good from Professor, Jose, Angel. Perfect, let's get it, guys. Right, so the first question. So based on what we know about now Latino, Latinx, and Hispanic, right? Historically, what these names mean and where they come from. To your knowledge, who did these names come from, and what is the power in the names? And I'm gonna be asking Professor Castro to go first when she's ready.
Thank you so much. I mean, it's a pleasure, privilege, and really wonderful opportunity to be here. To share space with you, to share my experience, my strength, my hope, my courage to continue my journey. And I really am humbled by the Latinx Hispanic Heritage Month every year, because in my journey, have always been surrounded by people of the Spanish-speaking world, as I call it, in Spanish-speaking communities all around the world that have their own challenges, their own pleasures, their own healthy sources of pride that have always molded me throughout my journey. I'm here just to share my perspective. This is a huge topic. It's, for me, it's not who is right, who is wrong, what terminology is right, what is correct, what is incorrect. For me is a sense of comfort and mainly about respect. I think that I am committed to positivity and respect, to respect others, to respect myself, to really learn and really educate myself as much as I can about other people's challenges and the global takes on how people of our communities here in the United States should continue their journeys. That always takes me back, back to think that people, especially, sectors of society, the government, sometimes some major companies, they just try to maybe in an attempt of inclusion, but to define what different communities go through and what they need and what they have to do without hearing their voices. That's why in my small corner of the world that I'm really privileged to be in, I love Skyline. And for me, with gratitude, I sense in my classroom, in my department, in my division, in my community at Skyline that has embraced me since the end of the 90s, because I am an immigrant in this country. I was alone here for 15 years, meaning without any family. I came here first as an exchange student during high school, but then for graduate school from South America. And I just had friends here and then made more friends along the way. And I was always surrounded by people from different countries, different walks of life, different places that embraced me as a person that was always willing to learn and include and diversify. But I also encountered challenges that I didn't expect, a sense of exclusion, a sense of, to a certain extent, xenophobia from certain people that I always felt that even though I was open and ready to be included in their space and participate in their space and listen to what they had to say in regards to their own identity, I always felt that they had way more to say about my own identity as a Latina, or right now I personally embrace Hispanic because I have ancestors that gave me so much inheritance of the culture, the languages of Latin America, since my parents are Brazilian. But I have ancestors that are Native American, that are Spaniards, that are Portuguese, that are also Italian, that are, I found out, even 3 times through ancestry, even Chinese. I was super happy to hear that, and I know for a fact that I have ancestors that were partly great Native Americans. So in that mixed salad that I enjoy so much about myself and that I always embraced, I came open and clean once I came into this country to encounter in many circumstances, sometimes not only with verbal language, but sometimes with body language, some resistance and some definition of who I am through their eyes. And I've noticed that based on their behavior and based on their way of addressing me, they tried to define me. And as I grew and as I went on in my journey in this country, as personally, professionally, and also academically, and then as a mentor to other people, I've noticed that more and more and more, the more I learn, more education I need, and more I absorb from other people that really are trying to just see their place in the world, find their place in the world. And because of that, I am really, really happy to talk about what worked for me. And what worked for me and up to now has been to really be open to also do one thing that I've seen that our colleague here at Skyline College, the counselor Kenny Gonzalez, once posted. He says, a dream written down with a date becomes a goal. A goal broken down into steps becomes a plan. And a plan backed by action makes your dreams come true. He says that he always inspires his students that come to him to do that. And I feel that I do too. I try to do that and try to really now learn more and more and more and train myself to deal with equity and to really educate, find a mentor to myself in every step of the way, even within my students. I learn from my students so much how to live, how to take care of myself, and how to position myself as an individual in the world that is really fed by the students' need to find their own identity. I feel that my serenity and my success in the world was also by listening to people. One time one student I had wrote that one of his ancestors said, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so listen more. And after I read that in Espanol, no, dos orejas, una boca, I really tried to practice that. And I feel that my life, my heart, my soul, my journey, my space is enriched. And also I feel that if we consider all the outcomes that students and young people and people of all ages can contribute to our self-care, our self-respect, our sense of belonging, our commitment to growth, our commitment to positivity, our advocacy for ourselves when people are trying to put us down, and the advocacy for our sense of agency and our trials to be involved in a lot of initiatives really shapes who we are and our identity within the community and the several communities that surround us here in the Bay Area. It's true if we remember, si se puede, si se puede. Yes, we can. If we're willing to learn and to be open and to really grow in every step of the way of our journey. If we consider ourselves Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Latinx, to me, it's all part of the enrichment. It's all part of who we are trying to be together. And I say that not as a cliche, but I really believe that what Maya Angelou said, in her famous quote, that it's not what people told you, it's not what people did to you, but it's how they made you feel. I think it's really, really important that that should start with ourselves. For me, I always, every day, try to make myself feel good about my heritage, about my story, about my history, about my ancestry. about who I am, what I do, who I try to be, what kinds of messages I try to give to my students, and especially and most and foremost, the messages that the students are giving me. Every day I wrap it up and I really bring it to my arsenal of information and to my soul. That's priceless to me. I love this job. I love my students. I love this space that Skyline College offers us in many, many initiatives. And I embrace this space, inviting you all to celebrate Latinx, Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Chicano, Chicana, Heritage Month, and many more, surrounded by the diverse community of the Bay Area we are privileged to live in. And for us, in a sense of agency, for us all to come together, to respect each other, and first of all, to respect ourselves in the space that where it ends, it starts the space of the next person. And with that, I invite you all to celebrate the student voices and also the initiatives that our Skyline College offers time and time again, every semester, every month, I would say, with our super proactive faculty to just find ourselves within the community and improve an equitable space for all here, especially now coming out of a pandemic. I really feel that that has worked for me in my journey. And despite of being an immigrant here, coming in with nobody as a support system, I found a support system with these items that I've just offered to you here in a very, very humble, but true and somewhat vulnerable perspective of my life and what I came to encounter in my journey. And with that, I leave you with all my heart, with a lot of gratitude, and carrying on to listen to your voices and looking forward to hearing your perspectives. Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Professor. And I think that was so beautiful the way that you said it, how, even though we're all trying to embrace our own identity, whether it be Latinx, Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Chicana, it's all part of that enriching culture that the Latinos and Latinas have. And we find our place within our community. And like you said yourself, we're just trying to share ourselves in our best way, even within our community and with those that we're interacting with. In your case, with your students, with the Skyline community. And I just want to say thank you so much, Professor. You always just drop incredible knowledge, and thank you for opening that up. Right now is going to be our discussion, and I just want to now ask Jose and Angel to just feel free to share now. Just to go back to the question, where did these names come from, Latinx and Hispanic, and what is the power in them? Is it the people who created it, or is it within ourselves that give these names and give these labels the power? So we would love to hear from Angel and Jose now.
I think I would like to ask first. So hi everyone, I'm Angel. I was born and raised in Mexico, in which this means that I pretty much didn't see diversity at the moment when I was young. I used to tell myself that my nationality was just a Mexican, and that was it for me. I never considered expanding or going beyond for another countries in Latin America until I arrived here in the United States. That being said, it really hit hard. You just came for one of your countries in which you live most of your life, and then you realize all this diversity, many languages, many cultures in which they're trying to stick and have this sense of belonging in here in the United States, in which at that moment made me realize that, wow, I was living in ignorance. I was so blind from their perspective and see this diversity that haven't been out yet. So that being said, I remember when I was registering for school, in which one of the questions was, how do you consider yourself? Latino, Latina, or Hispanic? And I couldn't even determine these terms at all. in Mexico, it was just Mexican and that was it. You were one speaking all your Spanish and that was all. Unless you have a native language, you could add it into the questionnaire or survey. But here, it was the first time in which it made me think, wow, I know so little about everything. And it's good because I finally realized where to move on, right? So I began learning. I learned about Hispanic. I learned the new España and this terminology brought Hispanic word, but also I learned the other part of the history, which Hispanic word here in the United States wasn't added until the 1980s. And this was because also many of the Spanish speakers couldn't even identify themselves apart from Latino. There was no terminology for Hispanic yet. So what they did was to put in the survey an option saying, okay, if you speak Spanish, which region are you from? And the principles were Mexico, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Colombia, and etc. But they noticed that still it was not enough to determine exactly how broad this diversity was of different ethnic groups. Since then, um, many felt also disappointed for the Hispanic, mainly because we live in Latin American and there is heritage of Hispanic, of course, Spaniards brought it to our sense, and also many have the ancestors from that country. But there also was the sense of belonging in Latin America and in a new place with already different roots of Native Americans in here. So many thought, okay, we're going to use the terminology from the 80s, 1800s, which was Latino, which means Latino Americano, someone who was born in Latin America and they wanted to identify themselves as that. And in that sense is when they started noticing the census that many of the people was already selecting this option, and they noticed how the pattern of the data was increasing effectively without having to classify everyone from Salvadorians, Hondurans, Cubans. They noticed that they were creating this more expanded community. And with that being said, I these names at the beginning, I didn't make sense to me, but when I learned from them and when I noticed the history behind it and what the people were fighting for, I noticed now the little thing that was missing, my belonging. I noticed what I missed. I noticed what I needed to work for and what I needed to learn as expands my knowledge to everyone else who was having this kind of difficulty, because no one ever thinks about, well, speaking of my experience, and probably I'm being biased, I would never thought in that kind of identity when I was in Mexico until I came here. And now life hit harder, notice that. And well, now I know exactly how I identify. I know how can I help someone who is having the similar difficulties living in a in a small town in Mexico and coming to these broader cities. Um, in that sense, I think this is how the power of knowing those words means, is knowing the roots behind it. Thank you.
Incredibly said. Thank you so much, Angel. Jose, would you like to answer the question now?
Yeah, absolutely. So before and foremost, I wanted to thank you all for the space. I think this is such an important topic, and as Professor Castro, who I had the privilege to have as a professor when I was a student here at Skyline, and now seeing the growth or opportunities that our students are getting to. So I thank you, Angel, for taking the space. One of the things that I wanted to bring up is, just as Professor Castro mentioned, and also Angel. So I feel that all these terminologies allow for inclusion and also a space for people to be able to say, not to be put into a bubble or to be told where you belong, because where you belong, I think it's if you're told where you belong is such a statement, but if you have the capacity to say, this is where I feel that I belong to and I feel that I am identified, it just changes the narrative. So as just similarly to Angel, I came to live in Daly City when I was 15. So I was born and raised in Guadalajara. So coming into an area that is so diverse, first thing that you encounter, or for most people, my experience, culture shock. When I was asked if I was Hispanic or if I was Latino, similarly, I had to step down and say, well, I don't know what it means. I need to do some research, because I don't know which one of those are related to my culture, to my experience, to my narrative. And that's, I think, everyone coming into these terminologies, that's first you might encounter the culture shock. Well, what does it even mean? And what connotations would it have brought upon me to select or adopt one of those specific things? So similarly, I feel that it's that self of inclusion. When I first find out, well, Hispanic, does that represent my region? What does that even mean? And then when you start digging more into it, you come to find out, well, those that coming from Latin, those that speak Spanish. Then what happened to Brazil? Isn't that part of our Latin American country? Is that being inclusive? And that's when I started seeing, well, you get to research, what does it mean? What does it come from? What was the movement? And then selecting what do you feel that is a representative of who you are. So in myself, I feel I identify as Latino. That's something that when I was speaking with people, doing more soul searching, I find that, well, you know, culturally, this name is really relevant to my story, is relevant to my journey, and is respectful of who I do represent myself as. So, but I think there's not a right or wrong way of representing yourself. It's more so, what does it mean to be that a specific way? Just like you mentioned at the beginning, Martina and I found it interesting going to my Latinas and Latino studies. I took a class, they don't offer often, but it's called Aztec philosophy. And one of the things that I love about the class is, starting on the class, Professor Jose Cuellar started by saying, you know, we need to bring back our and acknowledge our narrative. If you don't know what you're studying, then you don't know what representation. Aztec philosophy should be taken or transformed into Mexica philosophy. And then also he touched upon the Chicano movement. And he really felt strong and adamant about Chicano was a movement, and only people that participated in that movement should self-identify as Chicano. Whereas I feel otherwise. I think if you feel related to that specific time and era and what happened and what it was fought and what it was accomplished, then you can identify as those specific terminologies. So with all these terms, I mean, I feel that it brings more inclusion. Adding a label into someone, I don't think it's necessarily beneficial, but having a variety of names that identify who you are, where you come from, what do you believe in, just bring a sense of community. And that's something that I really love about the Bay Area, and started to realize, well, yes, I am Mexican, but this terminology allows me to share with people, I believe in the same things, I share the same culture, this is my community, this is who I choose my community to be. And that's why I love about all these conversations, because we get to define who our community is, and once we have identified our community and we put a name into how we identify, then the conversations become easier. And that doesn't mean, again, right or wrong, but I think it's the beauty of all these terminologies, and I'm glad that we're discussing it, because at the end of the day, it's not you against you, but it's like, okay, this is my identity, that's your identity, and that's fine. There's no right or wrong.
Thank you, Jose. And thank you everyone for sharing. Something that I heard common throughout everyone's share out was that we have a community, right? Whether, however we identify it, we have our community that we're able to identify, as Jose said, but we still have that power within our own community to be able to self-identify how we identify in that community. So again, I think it's just beautiful, right? Because I think it represents our community, the Latino Latina community, because we do come from different narratives, journeys, ways that we identify, but we're still able to come and have like this familiar feeling, like, I know what this means if I come into this space. I know what my community is whenever I get with my Latinos and Latina folks, but I still have that power to say, I'm Chicano, whether you be from Brazil, Portuguese, but we can still be in this community together. And I know that we have touched on it a little bit, but going now into our second question, how do you feel about the word Latinx, and considering that it is somewhat new to our community, right? We would like to hear out, how do you feel about the word Latinx, and what does it mean to you? Do you feel close to it? Do you feel like a connection to it? And why do you think this word causes so much tension in the community? As we shared out in the group, yes, we do have our community, but it feels that when this word is dropped, Latinx, or this label, that's where it's not necessarily right or wrong, like Jose mentioned, but there's still a lot of opinions on the word Latinx. So I would like to just feel free to throw it to whoever would like to begin it. But again, the question is, how do you feel about the word Latinx? And why do you think it causes so much tension within the Latinx community?
Well, I really embrace the term Latinx, and I am proud to say that I can also include myself in the group that associates with the term, because I think it's inclusive. I am all for inclusion, and I think inclusion, for me, for my life, from my perspective, for my professional and personal ways of analyze situations and go through life, is the way to go, no matter what. So the fact that a lot of communities, they feel more comfortable by using Latinx and by identifying with whatever I identify with within the Spanish-speaking world, the diverse cultures that this Spanish-speaking world, and of heirs and ancestors of this world, the communities that come from this world entail, I feel privileged to use that term as well. I feel comfortable with Latina, I feel comfortable with Latinx, I feel comfortable with Hispanic, and I really think that I try my journey to really get rid of any kind of preconception or prejudice. So I try to be and to educate myself in the light of inclusion. So because of that, yes, I identify and I enjoy the term in many circumstances, when people are especially including me and saying, you're as Latinx as I am. I really enjoyed that part of it. Maybe by the same token, the term generates controversy, because I think not everybody's on the same page. Not everybody is ready to be very inclusive in certain aspects of life. And I think that may stem from it. Those are my 2 cents here.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you for that input. Jose Angel?
Sure. So what do you think about Latinx and what exactly causes this tension in the community could be as the beginning? When I arrived here in the United States, and even when I transferred to Skyline, I had a great opportunity to participate in the learning community of Puente. Lucia Meyer, the director, she helped me to understand a little more exactly what Latinx is and how is this implemented to their own identities, right? The things that I learned from her and the things that I learned outside from her were amazing, which, one wants to be inclusive. There is no just white and black, there is a diversity of the colors and a diversity after many languages. We've seen that. I think Latinx, for me, it's a valid term. And what am I saying this exactly? You see, the controversy behind of the Latinx term is mainly because it's supposed to be a Western world coming from the United States to the Latin-speaking countries, right? That's one of the things that people are like in having a hard time to understanding this. But behind that exactly is to the non-binary people, but also for the feminists. Spanish is a Romance language, and is for male and female. If you have a group of men and women together, you all automatically say ellos están comiendo or ellos van yendo. Yeah, you already included the females in there, and you couldn't separate it from them with a prescriptive pronoun. So having Latinx in the whole title, I feel that this includes also the woman. It's diminish the patriarchy. It diminish this idea of the male being all the time in those kind of titles. And in that sense, it also forged the default of the discolonization mindset, because for the Spanish language, La Real Academia Española assigns terminologies in base of their own of the language of the construct. But we are Latin American. We have a variety of more languages in native languages in which there are no assigned, or there are no added into our vocabulary, and therefore these individuals don't have any association at all. What does that mean? There is 64 languages in Latin America in which they have neutrality. They have neutral pronouns. And yet, these individuals want to learn Spanish. They can't have that neutrality because in Spanish doesn't exist. And therefore, even though they're born and were raised in Latin America, they don't have that sense of belonging, if that makes sense. So I think having Latinx for everyone, in my perspective, I think it helps everyone without having to discuss exactly what is wrong or what is right. But I also am open-minded to understand if you prefer to be Latino, it's fine. It's your identity, I accept it. If you prefer to be Latina, it's fine. It's just the possibility to have other individuals to accept their own identities in that term.
So for me, Latinx, and maybe the first time that I heard about Latinx, I would say that it didn't came with a booklet. So Latinx came to my life, and I heard that Latinx is something that is now defining our community, but it wasn't well explained, or it wasn't explained at all. Then I started seeing the gender non-binary aspects of it and the inclusion. And just like Professor Castro, Angel, and everyone else, I'm all about inclusion. One thing that I can say about the terminology based on the way that I live it on a day-to-day, I myself felt the first time that I heard it that it was something new coming from more academia, and it wasn't taken in the cultural side of it. And one thing that I can share, and I don't know what the experience from everyone, but when I have gone out to my community and I go and ask them, well, have you heard about Latinx? No, I have not. Do you know the meaning of it? No, I do not. Do you know that it's so? Do you know that it's gender non-binary way of inclusion? And then yes, then now do you adopt it? No, I don't. And most of the things that I have heard within the community is, well, I feel that it takes away of my culture, because my Spanish speaking Latino, Latina, and I get it. And even within a few folks in the community, LGBTQ community, some of them do feel connected with the Latinx. Some of them do want to embrace, well, I'm a transgender, but I feel Latino or Latina, and then when I put the X, I'm unable to fully express this is who I am. And I feel that that's why the controversy comes about. Now we can see, for example, last time, interestingly enough, randomly, I was browsing through Disney Plus, and now they show you Latinx, Hispanic Heritage, and it shows you all the movies and all the series and all these things. And my mom brought up to my attention, she was like, well, why Latinx? Why not Latino, Latina? And then we went more into an in-depth conversation, but she still didn't fully understood the aspect of it. And I myself get it. So before these terminologies came about, Latino, Latina, Hispanic, Chicano, they have an origin. So they just don't existed all the time. So they had an origin and they became about. And I feel that this is something that is going on with the Latinx aspects, but it will take more inclusion and more education within our community members. We get it more so in the academia side of it, but with our folks, when you go and ask them, I was doing some research, more than 60%, 70% have not heard about the terminology, brand new. They don't know what it is. They don't identify with it. And I think it's just we have to have a lot of explanation and education, because people are feeling, well, Latin X, why not Latin X? So even taking language aspect of it, when you start saying, well, it has an X, so it's taken away my Spanish heritage way of identifying. So in those aspects, I feel that some community members have felt secluded and say, well, now this is an English aspect or English culturally relevant to the United States, but it's not taking in consideration who I am or how I identify. And I don't think there's an issue with the gender non-binary, but it's just the actual context of the word. Why X, why specific things, it doesn't identify me culturally. And I don't think it's gender related, but it's more culturally relevant. And those are my 2 cents.
Thank you, Jose, and thank you everyone, right? Because like everyone had mentioned, Latinx, there's everyone in the community, they have their own understanding, but also there hasn't been much discussion on it, right? Everyone has their own level of where they see themselves in Latinx or what they think Latinx is. So I think that's what causes so much tension, controversy, because it's like a word that's being thrown, but no one's really talking about it or saying, you know, what is it supposed to mean? Or like Jose was saying, why is the O and the A being taken away from Latino, Latina, if that's part of my language, is part of my own identity, right? But I'm also hearing what Professor Castro was saying, that people, it's supposed to, it's an inclusive term and people are at different stages of it, but there's so much more that the community needs to be taught on, right? There's that educational aspect, because if right here we're on the academic setting, we're in the college, we're in the school where we're hearing this term being thrown around in our classes and our community events, but once we get outside of it, it's a different story, right? Because our family doesn't necessarily know what Latinx is. Like, what do you mean? Like, you're calling me Latinx? Like, that's not part of my community, right? And like Angel was saying, like, there's just so much more that needs to be done, right, for this word. And I think there's so much more conversations like this that need to be happening. And that's why it's so great that we're being able to have this conversation around that, because you do see the divide. There is a divide with how people feel immersed in the term, but how they also want to be able to embrace it. So I think it is going to take a lot of time for the community, the comunidad, to be able to embrace the X at the end. And I want to acknowledge a comment that was sent to or put into the chat, that a lot of the Bay Area, what I have been hearing around too, is the term Latine, kind of that rhymes with gente. And people are feeling a little bit more comfortable in proclaiming that label over the Latinx. Porque Latine, you can put the accent in there, you can put, that still feels like a Latino, Latina word, rather than the Latinx, like Jose was saying. And thank you, Jose, for bringing that up. I've never heard the Latinx con los X's, like saying it like that. So I think that would be a form of being able to not resist towards the term, right, but reclaiming it so that you're able to identify with that term. And I think it brings up a great discussion to come in, to say, you know, thank you to ASSC for hosting this panel and hosting this conversation, right? But if we're bringing this this discussion and this topic into the Skyline community, and this could be our final question for now, moving forward, what can Skyline College do to respond to these concerns and conversations, right? We're in the beautiful space. We have some folks here in the audience hearing you out, but what else can Skyline do? Should we continue to have more conversations around Latinx? Should we continue to use the word Latinx? So I think it'll be, you all have been sharing incredible insight and incredible points, but with that question, I think it'll be great to hear from a professor aspect, from a student leader aspect, to a classified professional aspect. What can Skyline now do? I think this is our beginning stages, but now what else can we do? Or what else can Skyline do?
I think Skyline College is, as I said before, a space where it opens up to a lot of initiatives. It is a college that thrives in giving students voices, a sense of agency, and carries on what students are up to and are worried about. So since this is a work in progress.
It's 12 o'clock.
Sorry, my computer talks. This is a work in progress, and it is an ongoing conversation that I think that it's really important to be had in several spaces throughout the year. Now it's a time of celebration. It's a time of reminders for ourselves and for other people to just use the September 16th bracket until the October 15th, 16th bracket in the Latinx, Hispanic, Latino, Latina Heritage Month to have these conversations and to be a little bit more in the limelight. But in our community of Skyline College, initiatives are always there for you guys to embrace, for you guys to take over, for you guys to come up with, to use your creativity, to incorporate in your papers, in your classes, in your courses, in your conversations with your peers, and even in the conversation, in the bigger conversation that is embracing everyone of the how life is going to look once we come out of the pandemic, once we start going to campus more. I think that this conversation should be part of that too. Like, who are we after the pandemic? Because I think that in our global community, we're all trying to figure out who we are and how we fit in. So since it's an ongoing conversation, I really encourage, and because I'm trying to do that too, but I encourage everybody interested in renew themselves to take on initiatives that they're passionate about. And since I really endorse and appreciate the sense of social justice that Skyline faculty administrators and also community carries on time and time again, I am willing to be part of a lot of initiatives that I see myself that are meaningful, that are priceless for my growth and also for the growth of others. So I think that incorporating the term, if it's something that really puzzles you or intrigues you or that you get passionate about, I think it's a very important step. And I encourage you all to take it.
Thank you, Professor. And I really appreciate that aspect of encouraging not only our community members, but students to continue to write this in their papers, to continue to bring this up into their dialogues and classes, like how they feel about the terms, right? And how they feel with their own identity. And it's important that you stated that globally, we're all trying to figure out life after the pandemic, pero también also, what are Latinos feeling? What are the Latinas, the Latinx community feeling with so much, with also too having a label, right? Having to figure out what the label is that they want to be able to claim, what they want to do for the community. So I just want to say thank you for, sprinkling your professor insight and for just encouraging. I think it's a really important thing for our community members here in the Zoom, for our students. So I also too would like to encourage everyone else to continue this in different dialogue spaces, but in classes as well. And I'm gonna pass it on over to Angel and Jose.
So speaking from the student perspective, I already know many of us here are students, other staff, they are just the audience, and I'm grateful that you are here. Well, being a student, I know we have to study algebra, geometry, trigonometry, but also I seriously encourage you all to do a research or something that you're fascinated about. Or when you learn something new, do the research and try to be on top of it. Usually, I understand it is difficult for the scheduling and it is difficult to manage other tasks after the school. Probably you work part-time or full-time, but there is so many sources in Skyline College, and they also have conversations, of this kind of sense in learning communities at Puente, Trio. You'll find sources, and also don't block yourself. Be open-minded about learning this. And also, if you want to know what Skyline can do, also you can also portray your voice, because your voice is important. Your voice is valued. So if you have any suggestion, you can also raise that voice, and we gladly will hear you. That's one of the things the Skylines do the most: hear the student voice, hear the faculty voice, the staff voice. That's what we are working for the community. So we all can have a diversified field in which we're all comfortable and enriching our own curiosities and passions. So that will be my response. Thank you.
Thank you, Angel. That's very important too, right? The student voice. And, I'm happy that you're here in our panel because you are a student leader. So to all the students out there, just know that you have a member right here who's trying to represent you, who wants to work with you and collaborate with you. So thank you again for sharing that aspect on The Voice. Jose, please.
So one of the things that I want to start saying is I don't want to sound biased, but I might be a little bit biased. I think that we are at the best community college that we could be having these conversations. And I truly seen it from the student aspect, student worker, now classified professional. So the conversations that we have about diversity, equity, inclusion are always key and essential. One thing that I feel that we could continue to do as an institution is just opening up or having more in-depth conversations. If I learned something at Skyline, within taking most of my classes, college Spanish, Puente, and so on, is that it only takes one person to impact the community. If we feel comfortable within ourselves to be able to go out there, and I don't think that I have reached that point myself yet, but I'm trying to educate myself and continue on with these conversations. But if we feel comfortable enough to go out there and have these conversations and start educating our community, we start at our home, and then our family members start educating other people. But we know that we're often are challenged with questions. Well, okay, so you want to start these conversations, but if they ask you, well, where did it come from? Why this and not that? How come? Or don't you feel that it takes away from culture? Don't you think that it takes away from all these aspects? So I feel that if we have more in-depth conversations, more data, more research, so that we can put it out there. Because one of the things that I like about our communities, and we have even seen with our Filipino communities now, they have Filipino X. If we feel comfortable enough to be out there and say, this is what it means, and this is not a label that you have to adopt. This is terminology that if you feel comfortable, you can leave it on a day-to-day and identify. And I want to leave you with something that I learned with my kids. So I have a little one that is autistic. And one of the things that it will never leave me is, we went to the doctor, he was assessed, and they asked us, what are Evan's strengths? And then we started saying, well, he's a lovable guy, he is caring, I mean, he's curious. So we listed a bunch of things. We ended up leaving that office with something that it got stuck forever in my life, that they told us, now he has a label. Now he will always been as autistic, but all the attributes and everything that makes Evan be who he is remains there. And I feel that with these terminologies, now we have another word surfacing, coming into life. And if I ended up saying, well, I do identify as Latinx, that doesn't take away from anything that you have previously believed, your belief system, your values, things as such. So I feel that empowering people to understand the terminology and deciding, because this is a decision, nobody's imposing or putting anything upon us, but being able to have an extra layer of, okay, I do identify with it because of these aspects. So I will enjoy if we can move forward with more conversations so that we feel comfortable as students, classified faculty, to continue to have these conversations outside. Right now, we cannot welcome a large community members into our institution because we are in a pandemic. But if we individually can have those conversations, once we feel that we have the right tools, I think that these conversations will get better and better, and then controversy will just end up dying down. And at the end of the day, like I mentioned, nobody's forcing us to self-identify with anything. It's just another layer, but it's just understanding what it means, where it comes from, and how we feel comfortable with these things.
Very well put. And I just think that it's important to embrace labels for yourself that dignify, but nothing else. but majorly dignify the community, yourself, your journey, your work in the community, your work within yourself, and your heritage as well. And also, I would like to just make a comment in defense of people that sometimes have not found themselves yet. I hear and I read, especially read in a lot of the papers in the advanced Spanish courses that I get when they are about different cultural perspectives, and especially about the relationships throughout the community and with intercultural and intracultural relationships. I hear a lot of comments, sometimes critical ones, sometimes analytical ones, and sometimes really puzzling ones in regards to people who refuse or have refused to learn Spanish, or the people who refuse to identify with the community, and people who really try to cross over and spend a lot more time and share much more space with other communities, and especially other ethnic and other cultural communities. I, again, invite you, as I invite my students when these kinds of narratives come across, to really take a step back and give people time, give people their space and and an opportunity before you judge them, or before you jump and say, oh, come on, it's a global world and learn Spanish, do it, don't forget your heritage. I mean, before you start being combative and fighting about it, maybe it's a good idea to smoothly show them how rich, how interesting, how sabroso, how great, how delicious the array of cultural aspects of our culture, our heritage, play a role in society and in our daily lives for all groups. Maybe in their own time and their own, rhythm and their own pace, they'll find themselves and they'll join in. And we'll be happy and ready to include them, because that's what most of us, at least here in the Bay Area, and especially at Skyline College, IC are all about. Thanks.
Thank you all so much for this beautiful conversation. And as I was hearing, I can agree that this isn't going to be the last conversation. It's going to be ongoing and continuing on our campus, right? Because it's such an important topic that needs to be discussed, further explored, and just to make sure that our community is still strong together, right? We don't want to create any further division, and we just want to continue to have this dialogue where we're trying to have, like Professor said, we want to make sure that everyone's right there with us, and we're not trying to further anyone out, give people their time to make sure that they're still a part of this community. Even though we have different kind of perspectives and different kinds of ways that we identify, we're still part of this sabroso cultura. And I'm so happy that, and honored that I was able to be here, listen to you all speak. And I think I speak for the group that's with us in our Zoom, that I'm just appreciate that you were able to share so much of your journey, so much of your aspects, so much of your insights, so much of your own identity. And I think that Skyline is just incredibly, incredibly blessed to have Professor Castro, incredible vice president like Angel Gomez, and retention specialist in Jose. And, I just want to open it up to either the three of you to see if you have any last minute remarks, or if not, we can come back to the bigger group and see if they have any quick questions for you all. You guys okay? All right. Well, again, thank you everyone, or thank you to the three of you for sharing. This was an incredible experience for me as well, just to be a moderator and going through this with you all, right? And I just want to see if the community has anything, any comments, any questions, anything that you are wanting to learn more about, right? And I would just like to open it up to Alvin, to Ryan, or to anyone else who would like to bring in any other comment.
Hi, Martine. From the Center for Student Life, we just want to thank all our panelists for being here. And I don't want to mess up the recording. I want the recording to just display all your beautiful faces. But we actually don't have questions on our end, but maybe some of the guests who are reviewing this may have questions. And I invite guests, since we have a couple minutes here, if you do have a question, if we could have you just type it in the chat, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
I have a question maybe for the group, for anybody who would like to answer. I invite, you know, the guests also to participate in this conversation and to answer. Now I see a question, but how do you guys see the Latinx, Hispanic, Latino, Latina Heritage Month, and how do you celebrate it, if you do? I'm curious to hear. Because I celebrate it fully in many different ways, culturally, spiritually, and also, you know, academically every year, one way or another. I think I do it all year round. But I would like to know how you guys see it, you know, and how do you guys celebrate it if so? I'm just curious.
So interestingly enough, if you go to my house and you talk to my family, they wouldn't know when it starts, when it ends. They know that there's Latinx, Hispanic, Latino, Latina Heritage Month, but they don't. I think that within my household, it gets embraced. One of the things that we ended up detaching was from, so we no longer have cable, we only have streaming platforms. So before it used to be more so like, well, you watch Telemundo, you have Univision, things that so it will remind you of specific things, and here and there it will spark that culture relevancy or nostalgia that you wanted to celebrate specific aspects. But in my household, it's embraced daily, because I mean we are super culturally relevant. But I don't recall since I came here in 2005 that there has ever been any specific celebration, and I think that just tells you more about disconnect that exists and or the inability to fully understand, well, now as a community we are acknowledged. We speak a lot about inclusion, but how do you celebrate and embrace this specific month? So in my house, I think it's not ignore, but it doesn't they haven't grasped an understanding. This is, every year is the time, but this is the month. And I blame myself because, I mean, being fully aware and knowledgeable, I know that I have to go back home and say, hey, wake up, people. I mean, this is all that we are all about this, and we want more of this, but when they give it to us, we just don't know what to do with it. And it's been a good 16 years of it, but I think it's time to just to shake them harder and be like, hey.
Something I might say is that this event relates to the, in Mexico, the Independence Day is September 16, right? So they celebrate Independence Day, and then from where I live, we have celebraciones del Señor de la Misericordia, which is it's the celebration for the Catholicism religion, in which it expands from September 16 to October the 4th. And pretty much all this time was like for me recalling all those events and me going back in time and trying to buy tamales or just be celebrating and looking at the background that I have. It was similar over there too. So pretty much that's how I kind of like related. And thank you everyone for being here. I appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, I'm trying to answer some of the questions that are in the chat that are very interesting, you know, about how Skyline can maybe be a little bit more visible since it is an HSI institution. What are our thoughts on Skyline being an HSI institution, but it's not being visible, no? So that is from Cheryl Johnson. Thank you for the question. I really think that, you know, what I said before may be applicable to this now that we are transitioning, and now that this conversation is coming a little bit more to light. Maybe it's time for people to start thinking and passionately propose new initiatives, you know, in the Equity Institute or, you know, in different areas of the campus where this can always be applicable, but through the honors transfer program, research projects, symposiums, you know, the scholarship committee, maybe finding groups that would collaborate or honor this aspect of education, and, you know, so many options. So I certainly try to propagate that in my courses, to change curriculum. Now I'm writing different OERs, online education resources for all my courses, and I really am trying to incorporate them, bridging with the social justice and equity initiative that Skyline has, and to make people way more aware of these topics and issues for them to discuss, and for me to also be more educated in people's perspectives, in what they're bringing and what dilemmas they're bringing from their communities as well, for me to hear their voices as well. So I think we have many platforms, many places and spaces to have these discussions. We just have to propose them, I think.
One thing to add, I can say from a student perspective, but I don't know how relevant or applicable it continues to be, or the visibility that has everywhere within the community. I had the fortune to go to a high school that it was heavily surrounded with our Latino community. And I came to know, not statistically, but more so, so when you hear about qualitative versus quantitative data. So I joined the Hermanos program. So when I was in high school, I came to know that the Skyline was a Hispanic serving institution, because there was so much outreach going out there in the community. So there were resources from Skyline coming in to high school. I mean, now I feel that there is other specific aspects of it that has come about middle college, but I don't know as to what extent those specific initiatives has grown out there. I know that I was well connected from Hermanos to Puente, then to continue on with my academics, and I was able, unfortunate, to come back. But if anything, I will feel that if those specific aspects continues to exist, and at one point they grew, it was hermanos, hermanas. So I feel that growing out those outreach efforts, Skyline being out there in the community, because I know that it's often what we want students to come in. But in my situation, it did help Skyline reaching out there where I was, meeting me where I stood, and supporting me with the specific aspects. And I feel that that's something that it needs to continue to happen, and that should be true and relevant for all our students. But so I lived that experience, that supported me, and that allowed me to be where I am. So without that support, who knows where I would be. So that's something that I feel strongly in support. And if it continues to be, then great, and just expanding it over and continue to provide more support.
Yeah, and also I would like to highlight the fact that, you know, here at Skyline, we have a wonderful treasure of knowledge and perspectives, not only with Latino, Latina, Hispanic, Latinx faculty and classified and administrators, but just to mention some, I've learned a lot through the work and also through the contributions, comments, and even questions posed in many meetings and committees by Lucia Lackmeyer, John Uloa, my goodness, so many other people, Kenny Gonzalez, Imelda Hermosillo, Jackie Escobar, I mean, all the classified people that are heroes working, behind the scenes. We never have the chance to, or many, very few times we have the opportunity to honor them. But Angelica in the president's office, Marcela in, A&R, I mean, so very many people that I'm not going to be able to mention here, and they work along the way with people that are more in the limelight, but they are very important pieces of this very rich puzzle that Skyline forms, and they contribute, they bring in their heritage, they're part of the community, their power and their courage and testimony to help out with the success and growth of the students. And that is very important to be reminded. I try to remember that every time I see them, and every time I see them, I try to thank them somehow, to give them a special hug, to tell them that they are important to me in some way, because they truly are, and they make my job easier, better, and more helpful to the success of the students. So I really want to put it out there, because every time you see, one person that reminds you and actually, gives you some inspiration in regards to our culture, please remember them as part of this big puzzle that joins us together and molds us here at Skyline College in, in a space so rich and so open for people's progress and success. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for that last comment, and you as well, Angel and Jose. I think it's beautiful that we do have all these heroes, right? All these heroes on campus that are Latino and Latina. And it's just great to see that so many Latinos and Latinas are here with us in the Zoom room, but we also have so many community members here as well, joining in on us, wanting to hear our perspectives and wanting to just continue to do the work, because again, we know that this is just a beginning conversation to have at Skyline in our institution, and hoping for progress, right? I know that Lucia brought up Hermanos and Hermanas. What is that going to be looking like, right? And what are other initiatives going to be looking like moving forward after we have this incredible discussion? So again, I just want to say thank you to Professor Castro, Vice President Angel, Jose, all of you, and thank you everyone for joining our room and joining our discussion. It was very fruitful, and I feel like, and I hope that you all were able to learn something today. And I hope, like, again, this isn't our last time going to have this conversation, and I hope that next time we have this in the future, we will see you all again, and hopefully you bring your friends and your other community members so that we can build up on this and we can see changes happening in the Skyline, right, for your Latino and Latina peers. And just, again, remind yourself, I think what I want to leave off is that remind ourselves that we all have power in the way that we identify, but also in the power that we give to each other, our service, our grace, and everything. So I just want to say thank you all for joining us. And yeah, we will leave you off here, and we hope that you have a great rest of the week, a great rest of the Latino, Latina, Latinx Heritage Month, and have a great, have a great weekend, great couple days. Take care all. Thank you so much for being here with us.